Good afternoon. My name is Tom Ritten. My wife Anna and I are the parents of Ashley Ritten. Ashley is Evan's girlfriend. And I use the word is because I can tell you that there's not a day that goes by that Ashley doesn't think about, she doesn't talk about, or she doesn't dream about Evan. Now, I can tell you what I wrote was reviewed by Ashley, to make sure that I was going to say the right words. And I can tell you there's a lot of crossed out words. And as she's kicking me, she goes, "Dad, don't ad lib." Right down there. I said, "I have to. I'm your dad." I didn't have a chance to know Demian. But when I listened to his family from across the pond, I had like a self-reflection. And I learned about him. And now it makes sense why when we were driving down to St. Peter, Evan had such a liking of classic rock music. The Stones, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. They're all from England. I thought Evan was Irish. McManus. So as I'm listening to this, the other thing I noticed is that they're all in shape and they're all thin and all they talked about, well, not all, but a lot was pizza and pints of beer and buffets and food, and they're all thin. What happened? I was like, God, holy shit. But anyway, so going through this, and this is actually what you want me to speak about. So my kids have told me that I have a tendency to intimidate a lot of their friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, teachers, opposing coaches. But I'm really here to tell you, my bark is a lot worse than my bite. I'm not. My wife will tell you I'm kind of a big teddy bear, and I say disagree with her, but Evan didn't know that. And so when Catherine asked me to speak, I was thinking of a couple different stories, but I wanted to reflect on the first time I actually met him. So here I am, I'm sitting in the front, and Evan comes pulling up, and he gets out of the car, and he's dressed just like he walked out of a GQ magazine, right? Just like Evan would. And he's carrying this bouquet of flowers. And I'm sitting in my chair, and all of us guys have that chair in the house, right? And I'm looking at him, and I'm not moving. I watch him come up, and he's got this big bouquet. And he knocks on the door, and he comes in, and right away Ashley goes to him, and my wife goes to him. I don't move. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm meeting this kid for the first time, so I'm like, so he comes in, and he didn't hand the bouquet of flowers to my daughter. He handed them to my wife. And that, as a parent, that's pretty cool first impression. So he comes in, Ashley goes downstairs, and Anna goes upstairs to put him in the bouquet in the vase. And he sits down next to me, and I got my laptop out and my glasses on, and he sits down next to me on the love seat, and I pull my glasses down. I look him dead with this just hatred, like intimidating. I go, "Evan, if you're going to get good with my daughter, you don't impress the wife. You got to impress me." And he looks at me without breaking a step, and he goes, "I know, Mr. Ritt." And he said, "But I'm too young to stop and buy you a beer." Well, needless to say, he had me. I didn't know if I should shake his hand, give him a hug, or check in a Hazelton. I'm like, oh my God, this kid thinks I'm an alcoholic. But from a father's perspective, and I think this is kind of crucial, especially when you have a little girl, you just want them to be happy. That's happy and safe. And I can truly tell you that whenever he was with my daughter, our daughter, never, ever did I worry that something would ever happen to her. So for a kid that was 18 years old, he was witty, he was extremely intelligent. Now I also realized why he used to beat me pretty bad chess at the cabin. I'm horrible. He was like on a team. He's athletic. He was funny. And I'll tell you, he was just a really amazing kid. For somebody at age 18, I can tell you that he really impressed me. So I'll just leave you with, since I am Irish, and I thought he was too. I swear to God I did for a while. I just want to end you with a brief saying, and it says, "Gone, yet not forgotten. Although we are apart, your spirit lives within me, forever in my heart."
Hi, I'm Kevin McLaughlin, one of Evan's soccer coaches. You know, there's one bad thing about sitting up the front. You can't see everybody back there. I'm going to share a few memories from teammates and coaches about Evan, and some about Damien as well. This is from John Kinney, one of his teammates. Evan was one of the best people I knew. In all the years I knew him, I rarely saw him without a grin on his face and a joke on his lips. I could tell that he genuinely cared about everyone, and he would do anything to help people. On the field, Evan was the perfect teammate. His love for the game was contagious, which made playing with him a real joy. He was nothing but positive and never had a bad thing to say about anyone. From one of his coaches, Chato, one thing I always remember about Evan is that he was a quiet, gentle person. On the field, he was that way, but made a tremendous impact on the team every time he played. He had the unique ability to play in any position. Something I will never forget about Evan is that every time after the game was over, when I would look around, I'd always see him next to his mom. From teammate Luke, Evan always had a nickname that the whole team called him. I think it started off as British and slowly evolved into 008 over the years. It's better than 007. But the fun part was how much he got into those nicknames on the field, as well as channeling his inner heritage and yelling, "For England." We heard that all the time. And you know, I loved it because I'm half English, so never bothered me one bit. From another coach, Van Hong, the first time I had Evan in practice, I thought to myself, man, where am I going to play this scrawny kid? My first impression of Evan was skinny, not fast, and remember, I didn't write this, and English. My flash judgment of him was so wrong. Although slender, he went into tackles as if he was 6'3" and 250 pounds. His courage and passion for the game was inspiring. It made him one of the top players and certainly one of the toughest as well. When our team was playing well, Evan played well. When we'd get our butts kicked, Evan still played well. He was always consistent, and that's what I'll remember about him. Just like a soccer game, moments of brilliance and dismay show up at unexpected times. As I proceed with life, Evan will have a special place in my heart as a source of inspiration and a reminder to be consistent when life is up or down. From one of his other coaches, Chris Decker, who also had Damien help him out with his team. I had the privilege of coaching with Damien and coaching Evan for over 3 years. One thing that stuck out to me about Damien was how committed he was to whatever he did. I remember showing up for the first pregame warm-up late, surprise, surprise, and just as an aside, I got Chris's email last night, probably about 2 in the morning. So he's consistent. Expecting to find the boys lounging around, doing nothing, but I was doing nothing, but that was not the case. They were like little military recruits. And that's a side I didn't know about Damien. I did not know he served the British Army. Every drill was precisely timed and ordered for maximum efficiency. The mastermind behind this, of course, was Damien. Our first year we went undefeated, but that didn't stop Damien from writing game summaries with team and individual suggestions and strengths and stats for each one. This was on top of all the traveling he was doing. Evan was a lot like his dad. You could tell he looked up to him a lot. Evan never missed a practice. Not only did he make almost every practice and game, but he was at nearly every pickup game that Van and I would schedule. One thing I learned the hard way is never bet against Evan. Early on in coaching him, I didn't think he would be a good free kick taker, and he kept bothering me and Van to give him a chance. We finally let him have one, expecting the ball to sail over. Right before he took the kick, we jokingly told him, "Do it for England." He put the ball in the upper 90 over the keeper's outstretched hand. From then on, he took the majority of the kicks around the box, and every time we'd yell, "For England." He never backed down from a challenge and seemed to win balls that he had no business winning against guys twice his size. You can collect from Chris on this one. I still owe him $5 for a practice where I bet he couldn't hit the crossbar. You'd think I'd have learned my lessons, but that's okay. I'm sure Chato owes him like 30 trips to Dairy Queen. And a lot of Gatorades, too. Evan's family was one of the main reasons why I felt so at home when I first started to coach the group. I think Catherine was the first parent to introduce herself and ask how I was doing. Damien was the same way, too. Evan was kind and caring, and at times a little bit mischievous kid. I can still picture that cheeky smile of his. When I saw him the last time, he was no longer a kid, but a young man who took these skills and matured into a leader on and off the field. He still had that goofy, mischievous smile, though. I was really looking forward to playing on a team this summer with Evan and the other guys from the team. Unfortunately, school and the accident got in the way, but we hope to keep his legacy going with our men's league team scholarship and by embracing Evan's and Damien's initials on our team jerseys. My thoughts and prayers go out to Catherine and Lauren. I am deeply saddened, but I am grateful for the memories and the times that I shared with Damien and Evan. This is from an excerpt from an article that artist Chariscus wrote. Even in failure, Evan thanked those around him for their work and support. After we lost to Wayzata and our season ended, I was feeling very frustrated with the result. I was angry at myself because I felt I should have done better. All of my teammates kept to themselves, patted others on the back, cried, and took off their gear. I walked to get my stuff, and Evan stood up. He gave me a huge hug and said in my ear, "Thank you for being a great captain." His words came at the right moment. He knew how hard I was upon myself, and he knew my frustration. He knew exactly what to say, but I don't think he understood how much it meant to me on that day, nor do I believe he knows how much more it means to me since he left my life, because it taught me a lesson of compassion and camaraderie. As for me, I will always remember my talks with Damien about the English game and reminiscing about the glory years of a different United, and I'm long-suffering, just like you, Leeds United. He was one of the few people I've been acquainted with that remembers the years of the likes of Bremner, Lormer, Clark, Charlton, and yes, the brilliant coach, Brian Clough. I will miss those talks, but I will never forget and always cherish them. As coaches, we are fortunate and privileged to borrow these young men for short periods of time, or what we call the soccer season. For me, it has always been more than just about the game, as I am sure it is for other coaches as well, but more about hopefully teaching life lessons through the game. The joys, the sorrows, failures, and achievements that we have to deal with on and off the field. Evan understood this, as we have heard from his teammates and coaches. As a player, Evan always gave 100% and strived to ensure that those around him did as well in both games and practices. He wasn't happy when he was playing bad or when the team was playing bad. It was in those times you saw the true Evan. He would work harder and encourage his teammates to do the same in a positive way without singling anyone out or being negative. We had many talks on the sidelines as he asked me how he could do better in certain situations on the field. He'd then go out and try it out in the field. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Then I'd have to remind him that coaches aren't always right after all. But in that case, always refer to rule number 2. I'll explain if you want about rule number 1 and number 2 for coaches later. Evan had the knowledge and skills of the game that helped us when he was on the field, and he was missed when he was off the field or injured. Let me tell you, it was tough to keep him off the field because of an injury. Hardworking, loyal, encouraging, funny, dedicated, and compassionate are all words that describe Evan. I have so many great memories that I am thankful for because of Evan and Damien. As I look around seeing all of you here, it warms my heart and is a reminder of just how many lives Evan and Damien have touched through the years. We will miss them terribly, but the memories we will have of them will never fade. Thank you for letting me share about his soccer family.
Good afternoon. I kind of had this memorized, but I'm going to use my cheat sheet. My name is Cindy Bennett, and I work as the executive assistant to the superintendent of schools at St. Louis Park and secretary to the school board. And it is my privilege that I was asked to speak today on behalf of Evan and how I knew Evan. I'd like to share a few moments with you about Evan. About Evan, not only the student, that cute little sixth grader that was one of the first students that I actually met when I came to work at St. Louis Park, but the energetic, caring, witty, thoughtful, and respectful young man that each time you spoke to him, you got that smile. As part of the St. Louis Park culture of always making a student feel welcome and valued, the superintendent of schools created a group of students that she met with, and that all the superintendents met with, and called the Superintendent's Student Advisory Council. And this was about 40 students from year to year. They met over the lunch hour about 3 to 4 times a year, and there was always at least 30 pizzas waiting for them. Elementary principals chose one student to serve on the Superintendent's Student Advisory as a sixth grader, and those students continued all the way through graduation. The makeup of the group stayed consistent each year with the addition of one more student from the elementary schools, and as they said goodbye to the graduating seniors. In 2007, which is a common theme of other folks here today too, Principal Ursina Swanson selected Evan to represent Park Spanish Immersion Elementary School on the Superintendent's Advisory Council. It was at Evan's first meeting that he and I met officially in 2007. New to the school district in my role, I didn't know quite what to expect of this gathering of students of a range from 6th to 12th graders, boys and girls. But within minutes, I was blown away. The breadth of the level of the articulation and the inquiries was at an advanced level, more than some of the adult conversations I've ever had. Because I want to share with you my joy of Evan, I will also share with you some of the things that these kids talked about. They were all sent out an agenda prior to each one of these meetings, so they had some idea of what was going to be discussed, but they all knew that their opinions would be asked and they would be valued. As a sixth grader, Evan had no problem jumping right into answer. One of the ones I remember the most was a question that was asked of everyone: what is your vision of the school of the future? I did have in my notes that all the youngest kids were all blowing me away with their answers. But this one really stuck out to me, and Evan's response was, we'd like to have more electives that would allow you to excel. This is a sixth grader. How about more choice in class selection? And teach to every student. I say wow because I still remember that, going, this kid's a sixth grader? Okay. Evan jumped right in with the older students, engaging in dialogue and emphasizing what he felt and how proud he was of PSI, that you really got a great foundation if you came from PSI. Evan made sure that each year after his first year as a sixth grader, that each PSI newbie knew who he was and that he went to PSI. As the years flew by from sixth grade on, these students were involved in controversial issues that were on the agenda depending on year to year. And they were as follows: light rail, freight rail, that was a hot one. What gets in the way that prevents students to achieve honors or go to college? What is the greatest contribution you could make in the world, and how could St. Louis Park Schools help you? This is Evan's response to what his greatest contribution in the world could be. Be a good influence yourself. Other topics that these students were involved in conversation were the district's facilities, which is our buildings and grounds and our lawn and our older school buildings, the bond and the referendum, and that was a favorite of mine because Evan, along with all of the other students, had no problem telling the superintendent how she should spend that money if it passed. Organic recycling was another good one. The strategic plan of the district, the things that these kids and Evan also came up with to be strategic were amazing. Anti-bullying was another hot topic, and everyone was passionate about that. And this group was also included in the students' interviews in the recent superintendent search that we had in 2013. Evan thought this was the best. He wanted to make sure, he asked me, can I have a copy of the agenda? Can I have a copy of where we're supposed to be? What time I'm supposed to be there? Because I'm not missing this. At each meeting that Evan attended since 6th grade, he sat at a different table, made conversation with the new, younger kids, made sure that he knew who the newbie was from PSI. He was always courteous, engaged in the conversation, and in the later, like 8th grade and on through high school, he was such a great role model, not only for the younger kid, the 6th, 7th grades, but the older kids. When he spoke, when Evan spoke, those students sat up and listened whenever he had something to say. Evan was a great mentor, and he had no problem letting people know that he was going to mentor the PSI newbie first. It was crystal clear when he was passionate about a cause or the topic of the day. And he showed this every time that he had something to say by praising his teachers and letting everyone know how the students all help each other out at St. Louis Park, whether they knew each other or not. Whenever I would see Evan in the hall or at an event, he made sure he said hello to me, and he said that he thought it was really neat that SLP kids got to make a difference. In my short time of knowing and speaking with Evan, I cannot say that I knew him well, but he made a difference in the room, any room, and I am pleased to share with you all today that side of Evan's personality that maybe none of you knew or knew that he could do that. He made a difference in my life at St. Louis Park Schools, and he's earned my admiration. It is a privilege to speak to you today. What a kid Evan was. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy, a family friend of the McManuses. Kath, Lauren, our family loves you two very much. And we loved Damien and Evan. We are sorry for your loss. Somehow we find immense joy in knowing them. Evan had a brilliant life. He was a gift. When I looked up his name, I learned it was derived from a Hebrew name, Yochanan. In English, John, meaning Yahweh is gracious. Doesn't that fit? Yahweh is gracious indeed. I have a few descriptors of my own when recalling Ev. Willing, yes. Beautiful inside and out. Real, unassuming, imperfect, mama's boy. Goofball, often late for school. When I first met Lauren, Evan, and Damien, it was at an early childhood family education, or ECFE as we call it, class. It wasn't difficult to notice Lauren and Evan. I mean, come on, who doesn't love to see twins? Nor to notice Damien's voice, which so clearly sounded different than other parents milling about. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but our families were living in the same neighborhood and attending the same church right here at St. Joan of Arc. And within a few years, attending the same primary school, Park Spanish Immersion. Soon enough, we were crossing paths with more frequency, and our children forged friendships of their own. While in elementary school, our children were attending faith formation or Sunday school classes here, and Catherine and I eventually began a co-teaching partnership. Catherine is a great one for continuity, so we followed our children as they rose through the grade levels, sharing teaching responsibilities. Pretty soon, our Margaret was spending a lot of time with her friends, Lauren and Evan. We were her biological family. However, Catherine and Lauren, Margaret chose your family. And she settled in nicely to the routines of a Friday pickup and after school, including trips to Panera, often followed by sleepovers and orange rolls for breakfast. And you, Catherine and Lauren, and your lovely Evan and Damien took Margaret in so many ways. When returning from trips, you brought souvenirs for her, so thoughtful. Likely, Margaret's all-time favorite is the Burger King t-shirt, thanks to Damien. Many times over the years, Catherine, you provided Margaret with an opportunity to shop for jewelry that you had created around Mother's Day, or ideas of helping Margaret pull together jewelry for other special occasions. Thank you. We share memories of Super Bowl parties, including betting, losing, winning, laughing, and eating. While Kath would downplay her hospitality, it is always top-notch. Catherine and I continued working together and following our kids through church, even after I joined staff, and in the years that followed. Catherine steadily led small groups, imparting wisdom through her lived experience, sharing values through discussion, while always focusing on prayer and scripture. I found Damien willing to provide leadership on the slopes. I could count on Damien to play with kids, especially bringing kids in from the margins. Damien could begin a conversation with anyone. I believe Lauren and Evan loved his annual treks to our all-night ski parties. He was the cool dad that kids loved. As the years rolled by, our children drifted apart. They had attended different schools, yet seeing each other occasionally here. Evan and our Margaret were readers here on Sunday services, with Evan being a mainstay. Yet my heart was heavy having lost the connection, especially so for Margaret. So I prayed. What no one knew at the time was I spent years praying for a reunion. I'd loft prayers up often while I sat at the corner of Zarthan Avenue South and Lake Street. And for those of you unfamiliar with St. Louis Park, that was just a half a block from McManus' home. What I didn't recognize at the time as an answered prayer came in the form of Lauren asking me to be a sponsor for confirmation. For a year, we met monthly at our Caribou, just to check in. Many of you can see the beautiful family photo of Catherine that Catherine had posted on Facebook, and it's in your program, taken just following the confirmation ceremony. I was still longing for a real connection to this family, even having exchanged emails with Damien in LinkedIn as recently as this past November. Finally, through the Eccles family, who knew Margaret at Southwest in theater and Evan through soccer, as it happened, invitations were made, Catherine and Damien accepted, and they saw Ben and Margaret on stage. It was a glorious reunion for Margaret, Catherine, and Damien. Tears and laughter, it was just beautiful. I have a discipline of taking photos of all family and friends who come to see Margaret in shows. Somehow, that evening, I missed taking a photo of Catherine, Damien, and Margaret. However, the next day, Lauren came to see Margaret, and I snapped a pic. That very same week, while Ron and I were at work, Catherine came to our home, spending an entire afternoon with Margaret as she slept on and off, recovering from a surgery to repair a very broken arm. That's Catherine being present to her other daughter. This is my witness of this beautiful family. Today they face a lesson no one here wants to know and everyone fears, losing loved ones to death far too prematurely. In this time, I am aware I know nothing of what to say that can ease your heart that aches. We've listened to countless stories today, a mere glimpse of the gift of both Damien and Evan and how they were in this world. I know our family is blessed, beyond blessed, to know the sacredness of Damien and Evan. Thank you, Lauren and Catherine, for sharing your lives with us. Please know, while we may never understand your loss, you are not alone. You are never alone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Burris, and first off, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I've been told that I was in the same ECFE class as Evan and Lauren, but I hardly think that counts since I don't remember any of that. Our adventures began in first grade, when I asked Lauren to be my friend. In doing that, I automatically gained a second friend because Evan was never too far away. It didn't take long for me to become attached at the hip to Lauren, or rather the third brunette child of the bunch. The McManuses quickly became like a second family to me. In fact, before we all had cell phones and we used home phones more often, I accidentally gave someone their number instead of my own. Damien gave me a hard time for that, wondering why people were now calling their house looking for me. One of my favorite traditions we had was that every Friday after school, Catherine would take us all to Panera in true TGIF spirit. And I mean every Friday because I owe Catherine hundreds of dollars in bagels alone. That post-week treat could easily turn into a night at the McManus' house, as there was never a shortage of fun to be had when we were all together. It seemed we always managed to play copious amounts of N64 and PS2, but always in tandem with going outside and enjoying Foursquare or soccer, even basketball sometimes. From everyday errands to the soccer-filled schedule, I learned that with Damien and Evan especially, anything and everything could become an adventure. One time, Damien took us all to a St. Paul Saints game with Cargill. We tailgated outside for what seemed like a while since we took to counting the number of train cars that passed by. Once the game started, we had a swift reminder as to why we all enjoyed soccer, because after a few innings, we had seen a hitter break his bat, and knowing nothing would get much more exciting than that, Damien let us leave early so that we could go see the new Transformer movie. Even in recent years, when I went to a different high school, Evan was always game to go to the Caribou Coffee nearby to catch up a bit. He was always glowing, whether it was about Ashley or soccer or school. He always wore his signature warm smile. And Damien, too. This spring, as my mom told you, he and Catherine surprised me by coming to the show I was in. And I remember I lost it a bit because sitting through 2 hours of musical theater was not exactly his cup of tea. In closing, I'd say, I feel incredibly blessed to have been a part of Damien and Evan's lives. Through all the stories I've heard today, I can tell that all of our lives are richer having known them and experienced their love. And that is truly something worth being celebrated.